This is Slam Hockey with your hosts, Peter Wojcicki and Paul Swinbeck. Welcome to Slam Hockey, folks. I'm your host, Peter Wojcicki. You can find me on Twitter at Russian98, and I am with
Paul Zwambag. You can find me at Zwambag, ZWAMBAG. How's it going, everybody? Peter, what's up?
Yeah, it's looking pretty good. The Leafs are currently tied as we record this on Thursday night. It's 2-2. Just in Game 7, Williams is being big in the playoffs again. He's tied it up. Leafs were leading by 2. Caps have tied it up, and you know what? You're kind of expecting that. Oh well, but it's exciting and it's great. I'm still enjoying that the Leafs are in the game. It's a great game so far.
Yeah, and not everybody is expecting it, Peter. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll talk about what do we have this episode in a bit in terms of, yes, we will be talking about playoff matchups and who you pick, Paul, to win this series. But first, before we do that, how did we do last week on our Saturday's picks?
Last week, you killed it and smoked me, and to finish it off, regular season 150 and 103 was your record. 148 and 105. You beat me by 2, Peter. Can you believe it? We played probably like 22 or 25 weeks, and it came down to 2 wins. That's how close we were picking. Not too shabby.
Yeah, you're leading by 1, and I came back and won 3 over you in the end. It was fun. It was exciting. Hey, we picked every single game, so it's not like we just went out and picked a few of them. We picked every single Saturday game for the whole year, and I think we still did pretty well.
Yeah, I think we missed the first week. I think we were late on the first week, but yeah, every single Saturday picked every single game, and we're going to continue doing kind of called Saturday picks, but it's playoff picks, and they're going to be up on the site still. Yeah,
we already posted our picks. Check them out, and we're going to talk a little bit about them during our matchup review. And what else we have this episode? We are team ISOing the San Jose Sharks with special guest Zach Devine of the Hockey Writers and Dauber Prospects. And so, yeah, he talks a lot about the Sharks and Barracudas and all things West Coast. And then we also have top 10 players to look out for in the playoffs. I wrote a blog. I'll only mention a few of them, but again, check our website, SlamHockey.com, for more. But first, trending now. The head coach management shuffle, Paul. It's going around. It's that time of the year.
Yeah, the Black Monday was a real thing this year. The first Monday after the NHL season ended, which was this past Monday, and a ton of coaches got fired, and already coaches are getting rehired for new positions. Some are new coaches, some are old coaches, some are from coaches past. It's kind of crazy how the roulette board just goes round and round and round, and coaches just get regurgitated to the same teams or new teams and expect different outcomes. It's kind of crazy that there's not more new coaches that come into the fold.
So we're talking about, number 1, the new team in the NHL coming next year, the Vegas Golden Knights. They hired the ex-Panther coach, Gerard Gallant, to coach their team to start their inaugural year next year. Pretty cool, interesting, and again, a lot of bad feedback from when they was fired for the Panthers, and their whole season kind of went down the drain from there. It was weird, right, when they did that?
Yeah, didn't they put him in a taxi that night? Wasn't that the big story that they couldn't even pay for his ride home or something like that? Yeah, that happened.
Yeah, and he turned the team around the previous year, and he took them to the playoffs. And they still have a very young team and a young core, so I don't know what they expected them to take a huge leap and bound. It wasn't like they were way out of the playoffs or anything, too. So it's kind of odd. So good luck to Gallant in Vegas. Then we have in Dallas, Lindy Ruff is relieved as coach. And I think we kind of mentioned this, and I mentioned it, right? didn't I? Like a couple months ago, maybe Lindy Ruff, maybe Daryl Sutter might be let go, and that's exactly what ended up happening this week. Lindy Ruff got let go by the Stars, and they pull a stunt just like the Canadians, and they hire back Ken Hitchcock.
Yeah,
So
and
that's
I read an article that Jim Nill had to kind of be coaxed into it because Hitchcock and the owner have ties from way back when, and Jim Nill was kind of on the fence about it, and I guess he met with him and was okay with it, and maybe he got told by his owner that too bad we're hiring Ken Hitchcock. So I wonder how that's going to go in Dallas.
yeah. It was kind of odd too because a lot of people thought maybe Hitchcock might have been done as a head coach too, right? With the transition that happened with Yo and the Blues and so on and so forth. And we thought, okay, maybe he might sign for a short deal, maybe with like a team like Vegas, right? Uh, Young team, maybe an up and coming team, a team you don't expect too much to have an old school coach. But yeah, back with Dallas. So
And
I think
and
he already. Go ahead.
he's got a 1 year contract and a second option year to go into upper management. So I think that is his
Yeah,
transition to going to management.
something like that. And I think he's already mentioned something about loving Sagan, right? And thinking maybe Sagan could also play as a good checking center too, and on the PK. So we'll see about that. And then in LA, they fired Daryl Sutter, the GM Dean Lombardi, and they promote Luke Robitaille and Rob Blake in there. So that's interesting. I guess they're going with their players that used to be in their team and raising up them into king roles, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because look how that worked for Colorado. So
Yeah. So I don't know. I sometimes find that a little odd. But Robitaille, I believe he's now president, and Blake will be vice president and general manager. So maybe not head coach, and that's kind of the issue we have sometimes with players becoming coaches. So it's an interesting move, and you know we'll see what happens with the Kings. They have a few contracts, and if their players with those big contracts aren't looking through, we'll see what they do with them and see what Blake can do with them.
yeah, there's some pretty decent coaches on the free agency right now that I
Hmm.
think a lot of teams might be second guessing keeping their coach, and maybe a playoff team if they get put out early or swept or something that they might go
Yeah.
out and get Daryl Sutter or Lindy Ruff. I really thought Ruff was going to go to the Vegas Golden Knights,
Hmm.
but I guess Gerard Gallant is the new expansion man, so
Yeah.
that should be interesting.
And now time for this week's segment of Team ISO. This week we are Team ISOing the San Jose Sharks. It's of course where we talk more detail about one specific team. Last year you got our opinion. This year we're going into the blogospheres and online, and we're getting a better perspective. This week's guest is Zach, and you can follow him on Twitter at Zach the Bear. That's ZAKThebear. And of course, he covers Sharks, Barracudas, prospects, pretty much everything West Coast for the hockey writers, Dauber prospects. The list goes on. Welcome to the show, Alex.
Good to be here, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
So do you pretty much cover more San Jose stuff, or do you cover even more West Coast?
Well, I'm pretty lucky. I live about 8 minutes away from SAP Center, so naturally
Okay.
that puts me in a pretty unique position to cover the Sharks and the Barracuda. But I get up to Portland a couple times a year, cover the WHL, watch quite a bit of OHL and Q as well, and early morning coffee with some SM Liga and SHL doesn't hurt either.
Nice. Um, let's get into a little bit of quickly then, because we got a lot to talk about here. The game last night. Boy, was that a dandy. Did you enjoy the comeback?
I think the Sharks, they're a veteran team. They have some youth, obviously, in Marcus Sorensen, Jonas Donskoy, Melker Carlson's kind of a tweener, but they've been through the wars. The Sharks have played a number of playoff series, so I'm pretty sure that they had a good idea that the first meaningful game in the spring out in Edmonton, and since 2006 was going to have quite a bit of emotion. They definitely could not have played that first period any worse, in my opinion. The entire team really just looked like they were trying to stay on their feet. Luckily, they did. Obviously with the comeback,
Yeah.
but overall, I think this is a team that has the experience. They're not going to get too high. They're not going to get too low either. And so it really, I think, showed the Edmonton Oilers what it takes to win in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I think it also showed the Sharks' resiliency.
So going into a little bit more depth with the matchup and everything, are you a little bit more surprised? A lot of people are maybe even favoring the Oilers in this. It's odd, I guess, maybe because the Sharks haven't been playing that well lately, and the Oilers have. But it seems that way, at least in the Twitter sphere, and that.
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of a surprise. The Sharks did back into the playoffs. They fell out of first place in the Pacific, but everyone seemed to be writing them off, especially with the injuries to Joe Thornton, who didn't play in Game 1, and Logan Couture, who was wearing the birdcage to protect pretty much a broken face.
Yeah.
But when you really started breaking this down, I was surprised that so many thought that Edmonton would just roll. They're really a one-line team, and as the Sharks showed last year, they have an ability with a very well-rounded defense to make stars disappear. Sidney Crosby wasn't a huge factor in the Stanley Cup final. Pittsburgh won, so kudos to them, of course. But Tarasenko didn't score until really meaningless goals in the final game of that series. So really the key, I thought, was the defense. And Marc-Edouard Vlasic and Justin Braun had rough games for the Sharks. They're not going to go far with those two struggling, but I really don't like the Edmonton defense. Eric Gruba was brutal last night. He just seemed to really be out of place. And I was surprised that Edmonton didn't go with Matt Benning. He's been their best Corsi form defender or regular defender this season. I thought he was an underrated signing this past spring, and not having him and his mobility and pretty solid defense was a surprise on the Edmonton side. And I think Todd McClellan is going to have to solve that bottom pairing. And I think that starts and ends with Matt Benning.
That's good opinion on that. I wasn't too sure about Greiba either. Are you getting a little bit used to Merker Carlson scoring some big OT goals for you guys now?
Yeah, the last 3 overtime goals in the playoffs have all been by the Milkman, and he is such a hardworking forward, and he's really been a bit of an unsung hero. He's got the ability to play up and down the lineup. Most fans that are asleep well before the Sharks play probably aren't too familiar with him, but here in San Jose, the fans certainly are, and it's welcoming to see Melker score another big goal, and it's also welcoming to see some of that secondary scoring pickup for the Sharks. That was really their Achilles heel most of the season. That was really kind of the drum that I was beating on most of the season. So to see Joel Ward flip a switch, Melker Carlson get rewarded, Paul Martin, that's probably his only goal of the playoffs, let's be fair. But hey, it's a good one to get. So, that secondary scoring with Joe Thornton out really carried the day. And I thought Martin Jones looked fresher than Cam Talbot as well. I think that's something that folks forget. No goaltender played more minutes than Cam Talbot this season. He played 4,200 minutes. Martin Jones was right behind him, north of 3,800. So these are two goalies with some pretty high mileage this season. It'll be interesting to see if this series goes long, who's able to get that rest and get that recovery in.
Yeah, I'm feeling the same way for my Anderson for the between the pipes for the Maple Leafs. And then going about that with the injuries, I don't know. I didn't think Logan looked that good last night. What do you feel like? I guess it was a really nasty injury, but he didn't look 100% to me still.
Certainly not 100%. And if he was even closing in on 80%, I would frankly be pretty surprised. I would take the under there if we have any betting fans listening. Overall, obviously the Joe Thornton injury hurts. There's no way to replace a generational talent, probably the best passer of the last, 20 years in the NHL. You're just not going to find that, down in the AHL.
Yeah.
The flip side of that is the Edmonton Oilers are a very fast team. So having Joe Thornton out of the lineup, I think, opens up a little bit more team speed for San Jose. That doesn't have a lot of it, but it gets, say a Marcus Sorensen into the lineup. And I thought the
Hmm.
fourth line played really well for the Sharks and was a threatening combination with Chris Tierney and Timo Meyer was down there a bit. He thought he had a strong game after he got the butterflies out in the first. But Joe Thornton, he's really going to be missed. There's no two ways around it. But I think the Sharks do have some young players that are able to step into roles. They've got some very talented players up and down that lineup where they can mitigate the loss. You certainly can't replace the loss,
Hmm.
but Patrick Marleau, as the third center, he's going to have to be better. I thought he had a bit of a rocky game, but Logan Couture, you still have to respect. Even at 70-75%, he had a post. So there were times when he was very influential in play.
Yeah.
And as he recovers, hopefully as the series goes on and the playoffs go on, I think the Sharks can kind of count on more and more for him.
Yeah. And so they looked still pretty good last night, except for the first period. If they can continue this, how far do you think they could go in the playoffs this year?
I think whichever team comes out of the Edmonton San Jose series, I think that's probably about the only series win they're going to have. I really don't like certain parts of each of these teams. I feel like with Edmonton, they are a one-line team, and I've gotten quite a bit of flack from my new Edmonton followers on Twitter
Yeah.
for saying that. But you saw it last night. The Sharks shut down, Connor McDavid fairly well, and Sharks secondary scoring came through. And once you shut down McDavid, you might get a goal or two here or there, but in a big series, you need your best players to be your best players.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to only get exposed the further you go. For the Sharks, the secondary scoring's been a concern. The play of Braun and Vlasic have been a concern. So, unless they somehow put the entire season's ills behind them in a 7-game series,
Yeah.
I don't like them against either the Flames or the Ducks out of that other series.
Okay. All right. So I know a lot of people know about Chewy, aka soon to be this year's Norris winner, Burnsy. Tell us something we don't know.
Boy, I mean, he's really the straw that stirs the Sharks drink, and he was my pick, and he won as the Sharks Player of the Year, and
Yeah.
he definitely locked that up. There really was no other option. But I think with what the Sharks fans, you see the highlights. A lot of the rest of the NHL, his defensive game has struggled probably more than it did last year. It's going to be an adventure with Brent Burns back there, but
Okay.
for every flub he has back there on the blue line, he creates 3 or 4 offensive chances that him and Erik Karlsson
Yeah.
are the only two that can create. So the positive differential is what you get out of Brent Burns. So there's going to be times when you just shake your head and go, well, that's Burns. But that he's also going to make a few all-world caliber plays in the offensive zone. I'd really like to see him get back to where he was mid-season on the power play. He's looking timid. He's got to get some of that swagger back, because without Burns, and especially if Burns is off and you don't have a Joe Thornton, and we saw it last night, the first power play unit just loses a lot of his effectiveness.
Well, you got to kind of expect that from a superstar, especially offensive defensemen. They're going to put themselves in awkward positions most of the time, and they'll get out of them a lot, but sometimes they won't, and that could end up in the back of your net. All right. What is missing? I questioned Hurdle, and he came out pretty big at the start of his career, but what's missing from his game that could make him like a better player, or at least a more consistent top 2-line player?
I think there it's confidence. He's a player that, depending on how he's feeling, it's how he's playing. Nobody's impervious to confidence waxing and waning, but Hurdle more so than most. And I think for him, It's just leveling that out. It's understanding that that there's going to be good games, there's going to be bad games, there's going to be injuries to fight through, and he's just got to get that pro mentality where even on his bad games he finds a way to contribute, and tries to influence play. He looked really good as the second line center. I'm still not completely sold long term, him being a center, but it was a good step. And the playoffs and a big performance can do a lot, for a player going into the summer and kind of helping them mold that identity. He's still very young.
Yeah.
He's been with the Sharks, for I think this is his third year. But I think a lot of it is just adjusting to that 82 game grind and really staying healthy. He's had a number of injury issues. That knee of his is, more or less bionic at this point. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how that goes. And it looked much better, with a couple of days off, kind of got maybe a little bit of rest for that knee that has had a number of procedures on it. But it'll be interesting if that holds him back in his career long term.
All right, 2 more questions before Paul asks a little bit about prospects. Canucks fans might want to know, how has Jannik Hansen looked so far in the Teal?
I think he's been solid. I really was. I wrote a guest piece for Teal Town USA on who the Sharks might want to target at the trade deadline, and I had them looking for some more offense, kind of going back to that secondary scoring theme. I thought Patrick Eaves would have been a great fit. He has been for the Ducks, so they're going to run into that if both teams make it out of the first round.
Yeah.
I thought P.A. Parento, who hasn't done too much with Nashville, I thought he could have been a good player, a guy that has shown to be able to play up and down the lineup, as the Sharks typically will juggle one winger, and then the centers, and then another winger are pretty much locks, as Peter DeBoer looks to see who's going. But I think Jannik Hansen has been solid. He's been playing last couple of games, a pretty effective line with Tomas Hertl at the center, and then Michael Bodker at the wing, who's been pretty solidly a disappointment for the Sharks fans. I think a lot of people fell in love with some of those numbers last year when with Arizona, he was heavily featured on the power play, put up a lot of points there to boost his trade value. It definitely worked. But it'll be interesting to see if he's exposed this summer. $4 million contract on kind of a fringe middle six. That's a lot of money to tie up when you have Joe Thornton probably coming back, trying to re-sign Patrick Marleau, and then you have Brent Burns' new contract kicking in at $8 million. And Marc-Edouard Vlasic and Martin Jones are going to need contracts after next season. You got to do some estate planning. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Bodker.
Yeah. So then, furthermore to that, then, what do you see happening with Marleau and Thornton? How far do you think they are from retiring, and will the Sharks re-sign them, and for how much and for how long?
I don't think either of those players are retiring. I think they've got way too much gas left in the tank. Patrick Marleau never played a single game in the AHL. He came straight from the Seattle Thunderbirds to the San Jose Sharks, and he's been an effective player, for 20 years. He's had an excellent season, hit 500 goals this year. He's probably played some of his best hockey over the last couple years. Both those players have had their slings and arrows cast at them the last couple years. Let's just get that
captaincy and all that. Yeah,
exactly. In fact, when Marleau was on the first line, fans called it the captain's line. All 3 of those players have been captains for the San Jose Sharks in the not so recent past. As far as contracts go, I would be absolutely shocked if there's not already a handshake deal in place for Joe Thornton. I think he's probably going to come back on at least a 2-year deal, probably in the neighborhood of where he's at right now, probably high 6 numbers. He's on record loving San Jose. I just would be absolutely shocked if Doug Wilson and Thornton's camp haven't said, hey, we're not going to protect you, but we all know what's going on. Marlowe, I think, is a bit of a wild card, and I think that comes down to really a coin flip, and I think it comes down to money.
Yeah.
I could see Marlowe wanting more than a 1 year deal. I could see the Sharks maybe offering, five-ish, 5 to 6 million perhaps. And he's never had a major injury. So the
How often
there's
does he play in the hard spots, though?
well, the flip side of that is, you don't get to 500 goals
Yeah.
without knowing what to do wherever you are on the ice.
Yep.
Not everyone has to be Dino Ciccarelli, but Marlowe's certainly carved out an exceptional career, and it would be interesting, I think, with Vegas, because you look at who's going to be exposed in among the forwards. There's not going to be a lot of firepower there.
Yeah.
Vegas is a 50 minute flight from San Jose. They're in the Pacific Division. No state tax. That factors in. At some point. But so I think Marlowe probably might explore free agency a little bit. And I think out of the two, he's probably more likely to depart.
Well, you know what? As a Leaf fan, I wouldn't mind you guys releasing Thornton, and we could have him for 2 years, 7 million per. I wouldn't mind that. Have him for 2 years while our kids are still on those entry levels. All right, Paul, do you have any prospects questions?
Yeah, you guys are pretty loaded in the Barracudas. They've clinched their division in the AHL. Daniel O'Regan, can you tell us about Daniel O'Regan?
Actually, the Barracuda have clinched first place in the Western Conference.
Oh, wow,
so
awesome.
They'll have home ice for the first 3 rounds, and they're neck and neck with the Baby Penguins for first in the AHL, and that's still within spitting distance. Wilkes-Barre Scranton lost yesterday, so that keeps the Barracuda hopes alive against Tucson tonight.
In your face, Paul.
Yeah, dang.
Sorry. But Danny O'Regan has been just an excellent player, and he's got a pair of games with the San Jose Sharks, well deserved. Had his first NHL goal scored, and he's not a big player, but he's smart, and he really fits kind of the mold for what Sharks look for in their draft picks. They've been able to find a number of very good players late in the draft, like a Dylan DeMello. Danny O'Regan was a 5th rounder. Kevin LeBanc was a 6th. They've had success, and all those players have been character guys that might not be super strong skaters, but they've had very high hockey IQs, very good vision. Noah Gregor, I think, also kind of fits in that as a 4th rounder last year, who really had no business going in that round. So it fits kind of what the Sharks' organizational identity is. O'Regan has had really been deployed in every possible situation for head coach Roy Sommer down with the Barracuda, and he's just a smart hockey player that puts in a really solid effort. I would not be surprised one bit to see him make the San Jose Sharks out of camp next year. I think that he's got a very good chance, especially with expansion opening up 25 new jobs, to stick with San Jose. They have some pieces that they could move on from. And I think O'Regan, he was named today as the Rookie of the Year for the AHL. The hardware's there. He's been a huge offensive force all year long. Hit a bit of a wall, and as a college player, that's completely, unsurprising, but has regrouped and turned it back on. So he's going to be a player that is going to get a Sharks number here next. Gosh, we're already almost to the draft, so just in a couple months, you'll be seeing Danny O'Regan with the San Jose Sharks.
On the back end, is Tim Heed ready to step up into the NHL role?
I upset some of my San Jose followers when I tweeted that it's going to be a very different Barracuda team next year without Joakim Ryan and Tim Heed on the back end, and everyone kind of freaked out. Tim Heed's been exceptional. He's just got an absolute cannon from the point. Uh, it's amazing to see how a player of that build is able to get that kind of torque. He's got an ability to keep a puck in. He's fearless on the blue line. He's got good recovery speed. If he was a couple inches taller, I think a number of teams would have come calling on him at the trade deadline. As it is, a lot of scouts, when they come through San Jose, ask a lot of questions about Tim Heed, and there's a lot of chatter among the pro scouts of his game. I would not be surprised at all to see him in the NHL next year. I would be surprised if it's with the Sharks. I think he's going to look for a place that has some opportunity. That said, I do think the Sharks are going to lose a defender in the expansion draft. Joakim Ryan has been the best all-around defender for the Barracuda. I think he's been an unheralded part of that team and plays a very solid two-way game, has put up solid points himself. So it'll come down to Joakim Ryan versus Tim Heed, I think. And I wonder if Tim Heed's going to look for a team that has a bit more opportunity on the blue line, and like perhaps an Edmonton. Edmonton does not have a real excellent offensive force back there. Oscar Klefbom has kind of morphed into it, but Tim Heed could be your second power play quarterback on a number of NHL teams.
San Jose has been kind of sneaky good at bringing up goalies, and they kind of went out of house and went and got Martin Jones. Is Troy Grosenick the next sneaky good goalie?
Grosenick has obviously, he's AHL goalie of the year. It's well deserved. He's 1 or 2 in wins, goals against, save percentage. He's best in the league with 10 shutouts. The issue, and I think kind of the cause for pause with Grosenick, is it's come out of seemingly nowhere. You look at his averages as a professional, and they were very middling. And now all of a sudden, he's just taken the reins and run with it. He went back to, this past off season and went to Kelowna to work with some goalie-specific coaching and training, and it's really paid off. I talked to him quite a bit, obviously, and then this summer he mentioned a lot of the troubles he feels he's had have been mental in the game. And, goalies at this level, the skill set is very, very similar. It does come down to that mental aspect. So if he has, truly turned the corner and made it click, he could, I think, challenge for a backup role. I'm not sure I'd be ready to just go into the season with Troy Grosenick locked in as my number 2, but I think he could, again, with expansion coming up, a number of jobs are going to open up. A lot of teams have not been happy with their backup goaltending situation. Troy Grosenick might be a 2B, a guy that comes into camp, and if he doesn't make it, he gives your kids a heck of a backstop in the AHL, and if he does make it, it's because of this very solid season and the hard work he's put in.
And that has a lot to do with if Aaron Dell gets moved over to Las Vegas, correct?
Well, Aaron Dell is under contract next year. I think there's going to be far better goaltending options, as much as the fans love Aaron Dell and kind of his underdog story. I feel like whatever happens out there in Pittsburgh will have a lot going on. There's going to be some excellent goaltending talent out there. Aaron Dell has been a very solid backup, but it would be surprising to see him move on as the Sharks expansion draft loss.
Okay, one last question. We've talked a lot of AHL, and a lot of the Sharks prospects are already in the AHL. Is there a top prospect that we want to mention that's not in the AHL, that's kind of in the CHL, going to make the next step, or maybe SHL or NCAA? Is there one guy that comes to mind?
Well, I think Noah Gregor, with what he's done with Moose Jaw, he's been an excellent center for a very good Moose Jaw team, and struggled a bit in the playoffs, but he's going to be a player that I think Sharks fans are going to keep very close tabs on going forward. Another guy that I've seen quite a bit of up with Portland is Joachim Blichfeld. He's going to need a good bit of seasoning, but he's got a good shot, plays well on the power play. He's going to learn quite a bit under Mike Johnston up there with a revamped Portland organization. That's going to be a player that's probably long term. I think he's going to take the long route, but there's a lot that's solid there. Uh, Probably also, I know you asked for one, but there's a couple. Rudolph Balkers, who put up 40 goals this season in the Dub. I'm surprised the Sharks haven't signed him. The Sharks don't have a lot of elite offensive, sniper types. In fact, uh, outside of Balkers, I'm not sure I'd put anyone quite there outside of Kevin LeBanc, who I consider an NHLer at this point. Um, but him not being signed is interesting. He's going to age out of the CHL. He came from Europe. He was playing against men for the last couple of years in Norway, and so if you have a player that's already comfortable just going back to Europe and playing pro hockey, I would think that they would want to get him under contract, especially as you've traded away Nikolai Goldobin, who was a similar style player. So Rudolph Balkers, it'll be interesting to see what they do with him this summer.
All right, that's a lot of prospect talk. Zach, actually, that's it for our interview. Thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me, guys. Really appreciate it. Good to talk some San Jose Sharks and San Jose Barracuda.
Perfect. Again, we're going to tweet it out and we'll post on our website. And again, you can find Zach on Twitter at Zach the Bear. That's again ZAKK the Bear on Twitter. Thanks again, Zach, for coming on the show.
Thanks so much, guys, for having me.
Talk to you later.
Playoff preview time, Paul. Let's go to the Eastern Conference first. And as we're doing this, I'm still watching the Leaf game, and I got the Blackhawks game in the background. Nashville's leading there 1-0 in the second period. Leafs are mid-third. All right, hopefully Leafs can pull this out. But let's go to the Habs and Rangers. Well, we've already posted the blog. If you haven't gone to jablamhockey.com, please go there, check it out. Paul and I have our picks for who's going to win every single series. We even have it labeled for every matchup: offense, defense, goaltending, special teams, experience, for how good they are. And then we break it down a little bit in terms of what we're looking in each series. And we both picked X factors. So check that out. Paul, you picked the Habs to win in 5 games. I picked them to win in 6 games. Why do you think the Habs are going to take them out that quick? We've already just seen the Rangers now win the first game in the series.
Yeah, I know, and I'm already worried about my 5. Now they have to sweep 4 straight. I don't think they're going to do it in 5 anymore. I think that 5 games is a pretty high ambition, and it's not going to happen. I thought Carey Price was going to steal the first one, but it definitely was Henrik Lundqvist, and we both agreed that this is going to be a goaltender duel. We both wrote it in our series outlooks that this is going to be Price versus Lundqvist. The rest of the team is just kind of playing hockey. These guys are going to win games for their teams.
Yeah, I didn't even look at what you wrote. I just typed it in, and then I put it in. I'm like, wait, he wrote the goaltending duel? We wrote the exact same thing. So yeah, I have my own playoff pool that we pick, and I ended up taking a lot of Habs only because I was on the fence on who's going to outwin on this bracket part in terms of maybe Rangers, maybe Montreal, maybe Bruins. Somebody already took Bruins, and I was on the fence of Habs maybe being better in this series just because they do have, in my opinion, still the slight edge on goaltending and better defense. That's why I picked the Habs to win in 6. But if Henrik outduels and certain guys still in the Habs cannot produce in the playoffs, you can't win any games. And the Rangers might outwork the Habs in that factor.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead.
It's interesting with your playoff pool that you were talking about. You have how many teams? 20 teams? 25 teams?
25 guys making teams.
Yeah, and there's five teams in a division. And how many picked Lundqvist. One out of all those guys?
One Lundqvist, one Zuccarello, and one Kreider. Big ups to my boy Mark. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about my pool right at the end. If anybody is in our pool, they can listen to the last 2 minutes of the podcast. But yeah, it looked like barely anybody picked Rangers. I was on the fence of maybe taking them just because so many people passed them, like didn't even think about them. And I was thinking maybe I might take a Kreider or a Zuccarello. But it's very interesting that a lot of people didn't think about them, and a lot of people still kind of on the fence about them. But I think it's going to be a close series, and I was thinking about maybe 7 games, but I won't. You're always on the fence about 7 games, so I don't know. It's going to be a tough series because they're very similar teams, actually.
Yeah, they are. They are built from the goalie out, and a lot of their offensive players are kind of streaky. Like Pacioretty can get streaky. Radulov is who knows what you're going to get in the playoffs because he hasn't been for a long time. But yeah, I definitely think this. If you like goaltending, then definitely watch this series.
Yeah. I was hoping it to be even grittier though. Didn't see too much from guys, like a Kreider, a little bit more feistiness, or even Shaw. So I'm expecting a little bit more of that maybe as the series goes on. All right, let's go to the next matchup. There's the Ottawa Senators versus the Bruins. Ottawa number 2 and Boston number 3 in the Atlantic. And what do you think about the series kind of going into it, or in the first game that was yesterday?
I think the Boston Bruins are going to make an easy series out of this one. Like we've said pretty much all season, I don't know how Ottawa has been so good in the regular season. And I think it's basically their system, and they run a really good system. But when you get them off that system, and I think in the playoffs you can get a team off their system really quickly. And I think the Bruins are very good at that. So I just think the Bruins are going to have an easy time with the Senators.
Yeah, I think the Senators might have slightly underrated defense, and their goaltending was surprisingly pretty good this year. But they don't have that extra, X factor, as you would say, or experience that the Bruins have been there and done that. And even adding guys like a Backus and more veterans will help them. It was pretty cool, though, seeing Charlie McAvoy playing, right? Krug, and we're going to talk a little bit about this, with a lot of defensemen kind of injured, Penguins, Ducks, and Bruins. Krug is a big defenseman for them, and McAvoy is standing in and looking decent for them, eh?
Yeah, he's going to be a stud for many years, and I'm pretty sure he's going to have the nerves in the first game, maybe the second game, and it's going to go away real quick. And he's definitely taking over Zdeno Chara's stud role on the back end. So, Chara, you can go and retire. McAvoy's here to stay.
Yeah, Chara's still looking pretty good though, and he looked pretty good last night. If I didn't say, I picked 6, Bruins in 6. You picked Bruins in 5. Next, playing right now, it's my Maple Leafs versus the Capitals. The Capitals are just too good. I don't know how you, Paul, you picked Leafs in 7. I picked Caps in 5. I know you've never done it, Paul, but did you eat a brownie before making this pick?
No, I did not eat brownies, and I really thought about this, and I've talked to a couple of people that have kind of been, maybe the Leafs will steal a couple, and it's like, well, if people are thinking maybe they'll steal a couple, well, then they just have to go half and half with the next couple. So, my main reason is I think the Toronto PK can keep up with the Washington power play, shut down the power play, and the Leafs have a shot. That Washington Capitals power play, the offense runs through their power play. So if you can stifle it, which it's very easy to do in a one series event, to shut down a power play, and I think Babcock's got that mindset that shut the power play down, shut down the Capitals offense, and grind out victories. And I think they can pull it off.
I don't see it at all. The Leafs PK has looked pretty good this year, but I still don't feel their defense, especially even more, I guess, 5-on-5, is very good. They're not that great on defense. And Anderson, I haven't seen him steal too many games for Leafs, and he'll need to do that at least once in this series if they're gonna beat the Capitals. Yeah, the Capitals is just too many weapons, and they've been known to have very good offense, but now they are one of the best defensive teams coming straight from Holtby and out. So I will be shocked if the Leafs can put enough goals to take over the Capitals for sure almost every night. It's great to watch the Leafs now in the playoffs and that we're talking about them and the kids are so excited. Marner and Nylander, just watching most of the game even tonight, they look great. They're so exciting. They're fighting hard for the puck, getting chances, and hopefully they'll get some bounces, but I just can't see them winning even a couple games. So go Leafs go, but it's looking slim. All right, let's go.
Stay positive, Peter. Stay positive.
Hey, I'm still positive. I've even got Capitals in my hockey pool, and I got no Leafs. But obviously, I'll take Leafs all day, any day. Buds all day. All right. Next, your Pens versus the Blue Jackets. Kind of odd going into this. I don't think, like with Penguins so depleted, Hagelin's injured, and their defense still has so many injuries, and some guys are just coming back. Like Malkin hasn't played in a while, and it was his first game coming back in game one, and without Letang and some more in the back end, I'm still surprised that a lot of people still went way favoriting the Penguins.
Yeah, I found it interesting that they were that favored as well. And Oli Mata's back. He played the very last game of the season against the Rangers, and he's stepping into a pretty big role because he's got to fill in for Letang's skates. I think Justin Schultz, how he's played this season, I really believe he's going to take that Letang role and run with it, and it might make him a lot of money in the near future. So, the Murray injury last night, oh man, devastating. But thankfully we kept Fleury, and that's a huge keep because everybody wanted to move him and get something for him, and everybody's worried about the expansion draft. And I feel like Rutherford has done his due diligence, and he kind of knows Murray's kind of had a couple injuries, and this can happen to any team. And you're one injury away from losing your goaltender. So if you don't have a solid backup, and Fleury is a solid backup, like I don't care what anybody says, he's won a cup. He won Penguins a cup how many years ago? 8 years ago? 7 years ago?
Yeah. We even mentioned it in the interview with Zach. A lot of these goalies have been workhorses for their team all season, and they're not all 100%. So, yeah, the backups sometimes need to be pretty good. Maybe that was a weird move, and maybe it could have been a good move for the Kings by getting Bishop, but they couldn't make it to the dance. So, it was a good move still having Fleury back there for the Pens. Are you still expecting Crosby and the rest of those guys to break out? Because the first line did look a little bit shut down.
Yeah, and that's going to happen. I think this series it's going to happen. I don't think Crosby's going to produce a whole lot. I don't think it's going to be his job to produce a whole lot. I think Malkin's going to take that role because Dubinsky can shut down Crosby in a heartbeat, which is quite odd, but it's happened how many times. So the fact that Malkin's back and healthy and he's a playoff beast, and Kessel's looking like he's ready to take some point production up a value. So I'm all right with Crosby, Gunsel, Sheary just playing a hard game and not producing 100%.
Yeah, that was a beauty kick pass that Kessel made for the Rust goal, right? Oh man, that was nice.
And a beauty goal on the power play.
Oh yeah, for sure. All right, let's move to the Western Conference. The Hawks versus the Preds, and another one, basically team 1 versus 8. And Paul, you picked the Preds in 6. I picked the Hawks in 5. Again, how do you go with picking the Preds in 6?
I like the Predators this year. I really do.
Yeah.
I think they're going to go deep into the playoffs, and they might be the top half of that Central Division in the Western Conference Final. That's where I think they're going to end up. So I got to take them over the Blackhawks.
Yeah. I don't know. I just feel that, again, they left way too early last year in the first round, and the Hawks are still way too experienced and have a solid core to lose against the Preds. I don't know. I guess the Preds still have very good defense, and if Rinne, who has been very good, especially lately, can keep it up, then yeah, they could beat the Hawks. But I don't know. There's too many weapons in the Hawks. I'll still be shocked if the Preds win this series.
It's interesting. The Predators took 3 playoff series to beat the Detroit dynasty when it was considered a dynasty.
Yeah.
This is the third meeting up with the Chicago dynasty.
Yeah.
So maybe
you're banking on that.
Third time's a charm with these guys. They take out dynasty teams in the third try.
Yep.
That's what I'm going with, Peter.
They're almost done the second period and still leading 1-0. So we'll see what happens there. All right. Next, the Wild versus the Blues, 2 versus 3 in the Central. We both picked Blues in 6. I just think because the Wild just haven't been that great the last stretch, the last month, they look a little lost, and I don't think they're mentally ready for the playoffs. You, Paul?
No, I don't think so either. And it's the Bruce Boudreau playoff curse coming into effect, and they were kind of going backwards real fast for the last month of hockey. We kind of kept talking about it, podcast after podcast, that they're just falling down they weren't falling down the standings. They were just losing a lot of games that should have been wins.
Yeah, they were first in the whole league at one point.
Yeah. So what happened?
Yeah.
Like they didn't change their system. They didn't change much game wise. So
yeah, confidence just disappeared. So yeah, I guess so. Stahl kept on playing well, and Granlund was still very good. But their defense, Dubnyk, not playing very well. So that was a big factor in them playing very well. So I don't know. Blues, I don't know how far they're going to go to, but I feel that they're going to win this series fairly easily. All right, next we got Ducks Flames, the number 1 team in the Pacific, versus the upper team for the wild card. We both picked pretty much landslide wins for the Ducks.
Yeah, they're looking like a really deep team. They can score from multiple lines. I think Patrick Eaves is going to be very key in this series.
Yeah. Good addition. And surprisingly, how many goals did he have this year, Paul?
I think he got up to 30, didn't he?
Yeah, he was a beast this year. So he's coming in on fire. Good addition for them, and a guy who plays hard and who could score now for them, in addition to all the other weapons that they already have. Raquel even hit 30 goals this year, and I was thinking about taking him. I got a few Ducks on my fantasy team, so I'm hoping they can still go pretty far. But question mark is their defense. Now, Cam Fowler looks like he's going to be out and could miss 2 or 3 rounds. And they've already got Dupre and Stoner out. So we'll see what Corbinian Holzer can do in the playoffs.
Your boy, Corbinian.
Yeah, ex-Leaf. I don't know. Defense, they still have pretty good depth on it, but they're still very young. And I hope they can still win, but the Flames are just, I don't know if they're playoff ready right now. They're exciting to watch, but Ducks are just too experienced and play too much of a physical game. And boy, oh boy, watch this series. It should be an eventful one. A few of the West Coast games, even last night, were great. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Oilers in a second. But they were good games, overtime games, the Blues game, the Oilers game. And I'm expecting some of these games to be very tight and very physical. So it'll be pretty cool to watch this series. All right, and then moving on. Oilers versus Sharks, 2 and 3 in the Pacific. We both picked Oilers to win. Are you still okay with that pick so far right now after the Sharks pulling out game 1 in overtime?
Yeah, the Oilers have to get back to their first period hockey. Mm-hmm. Their hockey totally changed from the first period to the second period. I don't know what happened. Maybe the energy in the building disappeared because they were running hot in the first period, and that's what they need to get back to, is that Oilers fast-paced hockey.
Yeah. I've probably talked about this before, and you probably know about this, but I probably haven't said it on the podcast yet. but I wrote it on the blog. Check out our blog and our two blogs actually for West Coast and the Eastern Coast playoff preview for round one. But I really think Patrick Maroon, he hasn't been very good in the playoffs, and that's one of the reasons why the Ducks let him go, I think. It seems that he's afraid of making a wrong move or making too much of an aggressive play in the playoffs. That's what it just seems like. He's not playing hard. He's not playing physical and fast enough. And it looked like that again in the first game of last night. I really think if he can take his game to that level, then the Oilers will be fine. But he looked lost in the first period. And, McDavid was covered fairly well. Draisaitl, I still thought played pretty good, though. And the second line, surprisingly, was much better than the McDavid line.
Yeah, Maroon got kind of benched in the first period.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was the start of the second period. Drake Caggiula took over that top spot, and he fit real well with McDavid. So
He was skating. He was playing hard. He was skating. And that's what you need to give room for McDavid.
Yeah, they need a fast, speedy guy, and Caggiula definitely has that. Maybe Patrick Maroon's kind of nursing an injury, and maybe that's why he's been sat out, but it just didn't seem like he was ready to play last night. He played 5 less minutes than his line mate McDavid, which he's normally paired with. So
Yeah.
it's interesting that he's being skipped over and Caggiula's getting a little bit more ice time, and I think Caggiula's ice time is just going to go up even more.
Yeah. Yeah. We mentioned this in the interview with Zach and the Sharks. The Sharks are still pretty banged up. Thornton might not even play next game or a few games. It seems like he's eager to play, but they don't want they want to be tentative with him. And even Couture didn't look that great in the first game, so he's still banged up. The Oilers can still take this. It looks like it's going to be 6-7 games, but we'll see who has the advantage. It's still, and boy, was that first game exciting. The first in Oil Country too. That first period was so exciting, and then they kind of came out a little limp in the second. So hopefully they can bring back that energy.
Well, and they gotta not be outshot 44-19 by the end of the night.
Yep,
6 power plays for the Sharks last night.
Yeah, it was kind of odd too, and I think the McDavid play where he had a great chance to score and he was maybe kind of slashed. Then the Sharks brought it right up the ice, and then they got a bit of an interference elbow penalty. Was kind of borderline. Like a few of those were close, so it's tough. I don't know. I didn't get a few of those, but hey, it's playoffs, and some calls are going to be pretty tight. So good luck to the Oilers.
Peter, can you guess how many shots Brent Burns attempted last night?
Ooh, attempted.
Yeah,
it's got to be at least. It got to be like 15.
17 shots attempted last night.
Yeah.
Eight made it to the net. That is crazy. That guy just shoots from everywhere.
He does. I saw him behind the Oilers' net at least 5-6 times.
Yeah,
at least a handful of times.
He's super
everywhere.
fun to watch. Yeah,
and I can't remember when it was. I think it was late in the game or something, near the end, or maybe I can't remember. Maybe it was overtime. It seemed like he was on the ice for 5 full minutes. I think there was maybe a break where he sat on the bench for 5 seconds and they came back on. It was ridiculous. He is on the ice almost every single minute of the game. I don't know how he has the energy. Such a big guy, and he's still a great skater. Wow, he is a beast.
He had 9.5 minutes of power play time.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah, Chewy's amazing. All right, moving on. And again, check out that blog on our website, but also check out my top 10 players and teams to watch in the playoffs. I wrote it a little while ago, but I'll just mention a couple of them. My number 10 is Tarasenko. Not too sure how far the Blues can go, but the offense runs through him. And I mention it, you have to keep your eyes on Tarasenko. And Paul, did you keep your eyes on Tarasenko in overtime?
No, I did not.
Oh my God, he deked the pants out of the defender, fell down, and still passed the puck to Joel Edmondson, who's just strolling down Main Street. and puts in the puck into an empty side of the net. And Edmondson's hilarious. He's just standing there like, yeah, I scored.
Yeah,
He
no
scored.
celebration whatsoever. The guy that scored 4 goals this year.
Tarasenko did everything. All Edmondson had to do was just tap it into the net. So he didn't. He's like, yeah, whatever. Ridiculous. Oh man, yeah. So keep an eye on Tarasenko. He already made his beauty move there. He made a few great chances and plays in the game. He will continue to do this throughout the playoffs. Keep an eye on him. Number 8 I had was Justin Schultz, and you've already mentioned him. He's going to be a huge factor for the Pens, and yeah, he's their number 1 guy right now. It's crazy that where he's come from being on the Oilers just a year ago, right?
Yeah, I can't believe we got him for so little and what he's turned out to be. I think this is what the Edmonton Oilers really expected, and I don't know if it was because of the Oilers system or they were a few years too early with him that he couldn't blossom into the player he is now, but he fits just perfect with the Penguins.
Yeah, everything's looking good and shiny with him and the Penguins, and the better he plays, and the better it's going to help the Pens go deep. And then guys I like to watch out for are those physical, gritty playoff players who bring their game even further up in the playoffs. We know guys like Joel Ward, and then there's all the other guys like Brad Marchand, Kreider, Kadri. The list goes on.
Jason Williams.
Yeah.
Or Justin Williams.
Justin Williams. You're talking about Jason, the ex. Who was on Carolina? I think it was Jason. Maybe both of them. Both of them. No? Anyways. No, Jason Williams also used to play for the Caps. All right. Anyways. And Tkachuk, he is a rookie, and he's in the same fold as these players. He'll be very exciting to watch in this physical series with the Ducks. And just like the rest of them, they're exciting. Their effort, their tenaciousness, and skill are great to watch in the playoffs. I love watching those type of guys. And then, of course, we'll move our way up to my number 1 pick, of course, is Connor McDavid. His game will only get better in the playoffs. So check him out. Check out his highlights. Everything. His game is just going to be ultimately amazing. All right. I thought you were going to say something there, but
no, right. You summed it up quite excellently. I was looking through your top 10, and I like how you brought up the Carey Price and Lundqvist comparison. That they got to take a team to a promised land. One of the two have to do it, and Lundqvist is running out of time, so he might be putting his team on his back finally and dragging them to a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, and as we're saying that, the Leafs and Capitals are going to overtime.
So we'll see what happens
there. Oh yeah.
We better wrap this up, Peter. We better wrap it up.
And last but not least, check out that top 10 blog also on JablamHockey.com. And I want to say hello to all the guys in our Jablam playoff pool. Good luck to my buddy Jay, because I'm picking his team to do well. Man, I was so pissed, Paul, when I guess a lot of people are still picking the Oilers to do well. All I really wanted was McDavid and Draisaitl, and somebody took Draisaitl in the 3rd round. That threw me totally off my game. Is there a player that you really wanted that you couldn't get?
I picked 5th in my pool, and the fact that I got Crosby in the 5th spot, I was quite surprised with. A player that I wanted that I think I did want Draisaitl, but as soon as I saw McDavid taken, I was like, oh, that guy's going to go all Edmonton because you kind of back your first round pick. I wasn't touching a Capital because I don't, like I said, the Maple Leafs are going to beat him. So a player that I wanted, I don't know why I took Justin Schultz so early.
Yeah.
I think I took him as like my 5th overall pick. Which is a little silly, but
like almost nobody else took him. I think one other guy might have taken Schultz. So
other than that, I'm pretty happy with my team. No, I don't think I really wanted anybody specifically. I was loading up on Pittsburgh, Nashville, and Montreal. Those were my 3 teams that I was going with. Nashville was a difficult one to decide. Forsberg or Arvidsson. I went with
Mhm.
Forsberg, and then kind of looked at it afterwards and was like, he's not a playoff guy. He hasn't really performed. Maybe this year's his year.
Yeah, it was kind of odd because you're in the All-Star group, as I like to do it. Whoever did really well last year and whoever won their divisions go up to the All-Star group, and you had like guys that were haywire, Adam and Brent, and they went just like Minnesota, and let's pick some guys from Calgary.
Yeah, they
I'm like,
have no stock in one team, that's for sure.
but and also some underdog picks. And I'm like, then I go to pick, and I was like in the rookie division because I always just throw myself into the last group that I end up putting together. And everybody went haywire on Chicago, Washington, and Pittsburgh, and then Edmonton. And I'm like, I want to go with like Edmonton and at least one or two of those other teams. And I couldn't do that. There was no way. Stella goes crazy on Chicago. And then I'm like, okay, I picked McDavid. Then I picked one guy from Holtby from Washington. And I'm like, okay, nobody else has taken any Oilers yet. There's only one guy before it's my turn. I'm going to take Oshie, one more Washington. No, boom, right in front of me. Draisaitl gets taken. I was upset. And then with my backup team, I wasn't sure if I was going to go with like a Boston or Rangers or Montreal. And I think somebody took one guy from Rangers and two guys from Boston. So I was like, all right, I'm going with Montreal then because nobody took Pacioretty and stuff. And yeah, like we talked about before, when you're making your playoff picks, you kind of want to stick with two or three teams instead of putting them out spreading them out too wide.
Yeah, and I picked a goalie too early. With only 5 teams in your group, so only 5 goalies are going to be taken. I should have left my goalie till right near the end and just went with whoever the 5th best goalie was. I'd be happy with that. But I got Murray, and that's kind of nerve-wracking because Fleury might steal the net, and they might ride the hot hand because who knows how long Murray's going to be out for, if he's going to be done or if Fleury just keeps winning and they ride Fleury the rest of the way.
Yeah, Nilo ended up changing because I have a rule where if the guy doesn't play the first game, you can change him for our pool, and Nilo ended up changing both his Krugs. So Chara for his defenseman and
he got to change both?
Yeah, because he had 2 Krugs.
Dirty. That's a dirty move.
Well, you're allowed. That's the rule. That he didn't play. So, and he had Krejci out too, but he decided to stay with Krejci. But one of his Krugs, obviously Chara, and then the other one he switched to Backus. And then the other 2 guys that had Murray, Paul, both switched.
Oh.
So they're going. Yeah, Cheeseman and Gerard at work, they switched back to Fleury, and you're sticking with Murray. So that's going to be cool how that plays out and who ends up playing more games and who will win more games for the Penguins. That'll be an interesting side story going in on our pool. And that's it for this episode. Again, go check out our blogs. We have a lot more other blogs out there. A Kadri blog by Sean, the Leafs going into the playoffs by Brett, and our playoff review one, just like we talked about in the episode. Check them out on jablamhockey.com. And again, please subscribe and review us on iTunes. See you next week.
Bye.